least you're not called you're not considered the pig lady.
Not yet.
We can go
We
get,
have a meeting tonight.
we can go get Morris Butler's yardstick that they gave him when he was code officer to measure how deep the manure got, and everybody wanted to stick horses in their backyards, and how
Yeah.
often they had to remove it from the side.
Yeah, no, that would make sense, cause I bet it's about 12 inches deep and it's about a 20 by 20 enclosure there in the R1 zone.
My name is James Bellissimo. This is Samantha Foote, Rick Vandenberg. So Rick and Samantha will go over the work that's been completed up to date and go over, there's still the green warehouse over across from the parking lot. Those two lots, there's still some work to be done there. We'll do an update on the property transfer. We thought the property would have been transferred today.
Actually, we thought it was going to be transferred
Months ago, and then it was 2 weeks, and then 2 weeks, and so the new date is July 2nd on a Monday. So there'll be more info on that, and we'll have plenty of times for questions and answers, and then we'll do a site walk. So special thanks for everyone that's here. Thanks to SMPDC. Paul, Chuck's not here, but thank you, Chuck, and Lee J. SMPDC has been an incredible resource. The knowledge, obviously the supplemental funding, thanks for the money, and Lee J acts sometimes as my counselor, as my psychologist, and it's just great to bounce ideas.
Overtime.
And thanks to the EPA. Honestly, I wouldn't be here without the grant funding. We were at a point where I think we pushed as far as a lot of the committee could have gone without I guess the affirmation of the grant funding. So when the grant came in, and then we won again and then again, I think it really helped to continue our spirits. So thank you.
We also put Amy Jean on there because she filled in for Frank while Frank was on another assignment. And she came up here and stirred the pot and just got everybody whipped up. It was awesome.
Yeah, it was great to meet Amy Jean. And Ben Guidy, thank you. Thank you for your assistance. And of course, our grant partners, Sarah, Workforce Housing Coalition. Thanks for being here. Our Choose to Be Healthy Coalition, and Melissa, wish she could be here, but she had a last minute.
Melissa Paley couldn't be here today. She actually sent an email this morning. She had another thing come up that she couldn't attend.
And thanks to our town manager, Steve. He came in right in the middle of everything, and he's done an incredible job of embracing our vision and helping to pull things together with this experience. And Tom, same longtime member of Envision Berwick. He's always shows up to different committee meetings. He's involved with projects, and to the rest of the board. And I guess thanks to Envision Berwick. Envision Berwick is a volunteer committee group of about 14 people. We've had all kinds of members, and really just the whole entire Berwick community, every single person, we've needed their help, we needed their volunteer time. We wouldn't be here without every single person. And thanks to the planning board, Nicole Fectos here in the audience, Niles. The planning board has gone above and beyond. They've sacrificed their summer last year and are kind of jumped on board to do it again this year. You did. You did.
Oh.
Yeah, because it's important to...
I mean, when it comes to, yeah. When it comes to the work that has been done with the form-based code for the downtown and continuing to amend the land use ordinances, it's to the point where when we have development happening downtown, we've known, as a municipality, we've done every single thing we could for a successful development. And so the dire prediction 5 years ago is that everything would look the same. And that was a really real concern for us. And luckily we did get the grants. And since then, well, actually before that, we entered into a public-private partnership. And without that agreement, that would look exactly the same. And since then, we've been awarded about $1.5 million, $1.4 million in grant funding. We've received supplemental funding from SMPDC, about $500,000 in match funds from Fund of Jupiter. And like I mentioned earlier, the spirit has continued, and we've had all kinds of committees. Envision Berwick, Economic Development, Rec Master Planning's the next big domino to fall. We have a group that's dedicated towards making Berwick livable for all ages. We're working on developing a riverfront park. There's work going on at 71 Sullivan Street to help with recreation and possibly a community center. There's all this activity happening, and it's because of what's happening across the street. In Berwick, we've held several visioning sessions. We've had large-scale community engagement. We've completed a traffic study. We got another traffic study underway where we're looking at every intersection downtown, and we're looking at how we can get bike lanes in there and how we can improve pedestrian traffic, but also have it all work together with the cars. We've had a market study done. You'll see that there's a master concept that's been created, architectural renderings of the buildings. All but 90,000 square feet of buildings have been demolished. About 7 acres of contiguous buildings. At one point was 47 buildings put together. Yeah, and we are on our way.
We just do a little background. Samantha is going to run us a lot of the update on the cleanup that's been executed over the last several years. But I think James hit the nail on the head, and that is that there's so much incredible momentum going on in Berwick, and a lot of it ties back to, first and foremost, the hard work of a number of volunteers in town. And James recognized a lot of them, but there's a lot that still should be named too, because day in and day out, meeting in and meeting out, they've shown up and been part of the momentum, been part of what's going on. And you can tie a lot of the interest in developing our downtown to this important 11 acres across the street, of which we're about to update you on, about 8 of which will transfer to the future developer, the Funds of Jupiter or 20 Sutherland Street, whatever he wants to call himself. This will transfer, and this will hopefully be the next step in the journey for this property, which leads to economic development. So I can't tell you, I live in Berwick, so I'm a Berwick community member. I'm also the chair of the Ad Hoc Recreation Committee. I'm on Envision Berwick. I work at Crederi Associates, and we did this a lot of work. And then previous to working for Crederi Associates, I worked for Weston and Sampson. We did the demolition design to help Crederi Associates with the demo on this property. And at Crederi, with all the efforts of Rip Patton to try to help find leveraged funds to help grant writing, to do all this work has been tremendous. And then we have people at Crederi like Sam who have been the heart and soul of what's been going on, and the people that tirelessly go out and just execute the project. And so that's why I wanted Sam. I thought it was very important that Sam talk today about what's been going on across the street, because you all get tired of me because I'm here all the time, and ultimately there's so many other people that have helped and been a part of this process. So Sam and I will tag team this as we go forward. If I forget something, she's going to tell me. She's going to remind me. If I get a number wrong, she'll tell me what it is, and hopefully I can live up to that and do the same for her. So there you go, Sam.
All right. So this is an aerial view of Prime Tanning. The lot was subdivided into 7 different lots, and you can see the town hall. Is this a laser pointer here? No?
I'll be your pointer.
Okay, thank you. My arm cannot reach. So just to give you an idea of where we are. So the town hall is right over there where Rick's getting to it. And so the pre-treatment plant was also included in the first phase of our work, which is located on the other side. Thank you, Rick. So it's important to note that this was completed in 2 phases. The first phase was lots 4, 5, and 6, and then the second phase was lots 1, 2, 3, and 7. And we're in the works for the blue sort lot, which is just off the map, and lot 133. So Rick's going to talk to you about that later on. So just based on how we obtained funding and whatnot is why we addressed lots 4, 5, and 6 initially, and then moved on to lots 1, 2, 3, and 7. So the demolition design, which Rick said previously mentioned that Weston and Sampson helped with, spanned from October 2015 to April 2016. Weston and Sampson prepared the bid specs as well. We also got great input from Frank Underwood of Envision Berwick. He mentioned keeping the sewer infrastructure, some of it, for future redevelopment.
So it's here.
Yes, perfect. So after we finished with the demolition design, we moved on to demolishing the buildings. For lots 4, 5, and 6, all of the buildings were demolished, and for lots 1, 2, 3, and 7, only select buildings were demolished. So this picture here is of the beginning stages. You can see the color wheel in the corner there. The town has kept 2 of those larger color wheels, and there are 5 more smaller ones located in one of the buildings that's currently on the site. The color wheels represent, the craftsmanship of the prime tanning operations. They were constructed at the site, so the town felt it was important to preserve some of those.
And they're really cool. You look in them, and they're all these exotic woods, and they are really pieces of art. And the long-term dyeing on the inside of them has really kind of colored them very interestingly. And so to incorporate them in some future element of the redevelopment, I think that we've already got people who have come through that have talked about that. So trying to not forget the past.
So this is another picture of the demolition activities. It was really important that EnviroVantage prevent dust from migrating off of the site. So there was constantly a person keeping the demolition debris wet while they were doing their activities, so that there was minimal dust.
I think we had 0 complaints, right, James and Steve? No complaints on the dust, which was really good. For a big project, that's pretty good.
This is a shot of the demolition of the pretreatment plant. So this portion was performed concurrently with the demolition of lots 4, 5, and 6, but it was funded privately through Funds of Jupiter, as he is going to use this in the future with his redevelopment, but it wasn't part of our Brownfields funding.
And here's a great example of leveraging now, where we had an opportunity to remediate this site at the same time while the other lots were going on. And so it was much easier for EnviroVantage, and the cost came down for Funds of Jupiter to be able to pay for that because this equipment was already on site. So it was really a good time.
This is another shot of the pretreatment plant demolition, but this is the powdered lime tank. It's just a pretty interesting shot. Next we have, this is viewing into the alcove. You can see that there's still some building slab there, which is no longer there. This alcove was gutted and is now regraded. So this is part of the demolition on lots 1, 2, and 3, and these are the buildings that remain now. So this next shot is showing more of the buildings that remain. EnviroVantage performed a structural evaluation of the buildings that were to be demolished and the ones to remain to make sure that the ones standing now were structurally safe, that the walls were pinned and attached securely.
The important thing about this is that as much as demo can seem like it's just kind of monotonous, you bring in a big ball or you bring in an excavator and you knock things over, this was a little bit challenging because Funds of Jupiter wanted to end up with some building to work with at the end. And the walls on the inside of the alcove, this wall that you see here and this other wall that they're working on, they had to structurally support on the inside. And because those walls that make these walls and that wall and then another wall on building C went with the buildings that were taken down. And so they needed to be pinned, and they're temporarily supported. The nice thing about that is they will be rebuilt in the future, and they will become something far better than what they look now.
So this is going back to the aerial showing the extent of the demolition. You can see the pretreatment plant as well as the wooded building sort of on the southern end, and then the main prime tanning building portions that were demolished, leaving us with 4 buildings The L-shaped building, yep, building A, building B, and building C. Oops, wrong way. So, just a couple of facts for you regarding the demolition. There was almost 800 tons of metal recycling completed between the two phases. Then we had about 2,500 tons of general waste with 16 tons of asbestos waste. And when the stack came down, there was 6 tons of fly ash that we had to dispose of appropriately.
And there's another example of leverage that we're about to show you is that the smokestack became a tipping point for the community. You were either in favor of keeping the stack or you wanted it gone because of you used to watch it belch black smoke. And we went back to the Funds of Jupiter because he was going to be the one that was going to end up with the property. Asked him what he wanted to do, and he was willing to fund a structural evaluation of the stack. And we flew a guy out from Ohio, one of the true stack specialists in the country, and evaluated that. It turned out that the cost was too prohibitive to keep it, so it ended up being demoed.
So after the buildings were removed, that's when we moved on to the slab removal. As part of our analysis of Brownfield's cleanup alternatives, we outlined taking those building foundation slabs, which were concrete, and grinding them up with other asphalt and brick debris from the buildings. And that's what we used to make the temporary cover system that you see on the site now, that sort of crushed up rubble, is all of those former building foundation slabs just crushed up. And once the slabs were removed, that's when we moved on to our test pitting work to make sure that there wasn't any subsurface contamination that needed to be removed. The hatched area is where we demoed, and then the orange are the test pits on lots 4, 5, and 6. And this figure shows the test pits on lots 1, 2, and 3. Lot 7 was basically all the L-shaped building, so not really anything happened on that lot. Since we didn't demo that building. But what you see here is the white and orange is a layer of leather scraps and hides that we found, which were underneath the slab and were left in place because of the temporary cover system that we have on the site now. And there wasn't any, so according to the analysis of Brownfield's cleanup alternatives, we were going to remove oil-saturated soil. So this didn't fall under that. And with our cover system, and since this is the proposed area of a parking lot, we left those in place.
These test pits were also designed, as we're doing them, we also wanted to make sure that there wasn't any other gross contamination that was present. You know, we specifically wanted to cover the what we call PAH contaminated soil, metals contamination. We wanted to make sure there wasn't any significant sources of VOCs or anything like that in the open areas that would eventually be covered.
So these are some images of test pitting work. You can see the high groundwater that we encountered during our work, which proved to be a little bit of an issue at times. In the top right picture, you see some black oil in the groundwater. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Stay tuned. So
here's the stack demo. We have a little video that we can show you of the stack coming down. If it goes fast, it was running slow a little while ago. Everybody watch the circle. Oh my God, that was actually fast. So what they did is there's an excavator in the far right that's pulling on a cable, and their original intent was to pull the corbel off so they could reach with a piece of high reach of equipment and kind of munch the stack down. But there ends up being a weak spot as they're trying to pull this corbel off. Luckily, they had the directive safety here, and they cordoned off the entire area with the understanding that this might happen. And so they start to pull, and there's a weak spot. You'll see it break down here, and the whole stack goes, which actually worked out great because in the long run, they got the whole stack down safely, and we were able to save some bricks. Yay! There's one on the other side. And you can see the superstructure that was part of the stack that kind of was left behind, almost a skeleton. And so the town sent some trucks over once this came down, and they took bricks over to another part of the site where they were sorted and cleaned. And James will talk about it, but you see some engraved. These bricks will be part of an engraving kind of fundraiser that will happen.
$99.99.
What?
For $99.99.
I'm in.
So after we demoed the buildings and took out the building slabs, we constructed this temporary cover system area, which is that crushed concrete, asphalt, and brick material. There's also a permanent cover system area, which the green space that you see down at the edge. It's a DEP approved permanent cover system, so the town can use that as they want. It's a marker layer like you'd see in like garden fabric marker layer with 8 inches of clean fill, compacted fill, and then 4 inches of loam on top of that. Seed.
Weed seed.
Yeah.
So is the town retaining that green piece?
So ultimately, we can add to that later, but hopefully the future holds the town will get more than this. When you see the concept, the green space that extends by here is actually more robust than that even. That ultimately the developer, Mark Ahaya, has indicated that he wants to give back to the town. Within certain stipulations, the town has decided that they would be happy to accept that once the engineered cover system is completed on the rest of the permanent cover system. And the reason why you see so much kind of purpley blue is that since the developer did not know what ultimately when this started, what the redevelopment would be, it wasn't prudent to put a permanent cover system over everything, because for DEP's purposes, when you cover things, some of that can be building foundation and some could be other hardscapes like sidewalks. And so not knowing where those going, we wanted to create a blank slate that could be a workable area that the developer could imagine on. You got parking lot, you got all these other things.
So that low spot that we saw earlier was regraded with the temporary cover system to provide nice even grades for redevelopment. And this is a picture of the permanent cover system green space. So back to the oily water that mentioned earlier. We discovered a tank, an underground storage tank in an area of soil that was saturated with what appeared to be number 6 fuel oil. And so based on our excavation of this material, it was located right underneath the boiler room where another above ground storage tank that held number 6 fuel oil was located. So that whole combination just led to this release of oil to the subsurface. So SMPDC provided us with funding to remove the tank and remove the oil saturated soil, and Funds of Jupiter matched 50% of that funding as well. And that included cleaning of the above ground storage tank, which is on the site now. It's the big red thing, you can't miss it. So.
And he's keeping that because he's considering using that in some of the design potentially, painting it out and making it look like a funky, tank. And I don't know how it will work, but it's a vision that I don't have. So.
These are some pictures of the tank removal. That's Rick right there, and looking cold. And so the tank was actually pulled out in 3 pieces. So what you see there is just a third of it. It was a pretty big tank. And you can see this is the middle section there with a lot of corroded holes in it. It's just a thin, single-walled steel tank that we don't know when it was installed.
You could bend this tank with your hand because it was so corroded.
And you can see in the CMU block foundation walls there that the number 6 oil had gotten trapped in there as well. So it was just these pools of the oil. So all of that was removed from the site.
230 tons?
Yeah. So the tank removal and oil saturated soil removal happened just this past December. We worked on our report summarizing all of this in January and February and submitted a final version in March where Maine DEP will provide an updated no action assurance letter for that.
Yeah, there's actually been, and so the idea here was to get the property closer to redevelopment with this cleanup. We did, there were 8 items, Ben, is that right? 8 items in the original VRAP letter that were things like, manage soil properly, take care, do some additional characterization underneath things. And we checked a number of the boxes when it came to the VRAP. And then, so to help the developer along, Maine DEP has issued very recently, within the last couple of weeks, a draft revised letter to basically tell the developer, okay, here's just make sure you do these other following things, and you can get your certificate of complete, a certificate of completion for that follow-on work. DEP is also preparing a certificate of completion for the work that's been done. That'll be issued hopefully sometime this month, and Ben just gave me the thumbs up, so that'll be issued this week, which is very good, Frank. We're getting a certificate of completion, which is now can be counted as acres cleaned up, which is awesome. And then that certificate of completion will have the final declaration of environmental covenant language, which basically will say, hey, it gets recorded with the deed. It says that you have to manage soil properly, that you have to, any buildings that are continuously occupied, you need to demonstrate that you don't have any vapor concerns in those buildings, and you can't extract groundwater without DEP's permission. Basically, that's what it says. Go ahead.
So did you actually survey off the area where the hides are so that somebody is going to be aware that there's hides and that
Yeah. So the
degradation of those?
right. So they get that area is slated for a parking lot, and the figures that we provided in that final report document sort of the location of that. There's that cover system that's on top of it, and for a parking lot, depending on we're recommending that the developer build on top of the cover system and not impact the cover system.
You didn't separate us. You didn't do a separate survey of that specific waste area? Correct.
We did not.
There are GPS points of the test pit location, so we use that to help make the location more accurate. But at the, we didn't excavate the entire area of the hides. We just did those select test pits and used that to delineate the area until we got to a clean test pit. So it does narrow down the area significantly. Your turn?
Oh yeah, go ahead. You advance the slide and then that. So now's the fun stuff. Now that we've finished our work and that DEP will be, signing off on, the next steps, there's future work, and the Brownfield's funding paid for some master planning work. And so this master planning identified what could potentially go on this site. And you can see this obviously looks very different. It's hard to make out, but you got building A, you got the L-shaped building C there, and you have building B and building C. And the master plan imagined this much more robust green space and some residential buildings. So the entire site will become mixed use. Maybe a building or two will be mixed use in themselves, but the entire project will end up being mixed use. And when you look at, you can see on the edge on the right, you can see lot 133, and then just barely you see a portion of the blue sort lot, which I'll talk about. Ultimately, those will be residential, and the market study work that we did demonstrated that there's about a potential for about 200 units of market rate residential with some senior housing and some workforce housing. So it's actually very exciting to see that that there's this much potential in this property. They've also imagined another road that goes through the site that basically cuts the site in half and allows for a bike trail and new parking areas, and you can see the connection now made with the town hall, and you start to increase the fabric of the downtown. James, do you mind just going one ahead? Sure. So that red arrow is the direction that you'll be looking. So this is the vision for building A. Tom House Architects imagined this as a brew pub and a small market. And he's kind of fiddled with the when you get out there and see the buildings, it's got kind of this characteristic tip-up concrete shape to it, and he's imagined putting some energy efficiency on the outside of it, and also only 2/3 of that building on this side are structural, so you can take that off and you can put new building materials on there, and you can play with that in any shape or form and make that whatever you want. But this is one kind of rendition of that. Next slide. So the next vision, we'll look at the L-shaped building, and it's kind of looking from the green space. And he imagined that with lots of brick, wood, and glass elements. And most recently, there's been a restaurateur that may be interested in the corner closest to the green space, so they can have some outdoor seating, and they can do some they can do some indoor-outdoor dining, and the other spaces are imagined as basically as storefronts.
Forgot the most important part: outdoor music.
I'm sorry, James. Yeah, outdoor music. Very important to James. And so this perspective is kind of looking through this parking lot into the alcove. And the one thing you'll get about this that he's decided that he wants to include is this element of once you come into the redevelopment and park, there will be this covered alcove that runs through covered area that runs through the alcove that will allow you to walk in all elements and in the rain and so forth. And the kind of pergola on the top of Building A could be you know, a tasting area for the brew pub, that kind of thing. And I wish I could bring you up there today because that the view from the top of the building back towards Somersworth is really, really cool. So this is the cleanup concept for Lot 130 and Lot 133. There's still Brownfield's money left for these two lots. The most recently we got the Blue Sort building, which is called out, and they're part of the grants that we got for 1, 2, 3, 7, and 1. It includes 133. So there's $200,000 for that. And so, what to support the future redevelopment, which we showed as residential, we've come up with a concept, and we'll be preparing an analysis of Brownfield's cleanup alternatives for that parcel. Good. So there's metals and PAH contamination, and you see some dots on this map, and it shows previous exploration, previous work that's been done that demonstrates polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons and metals and a few other things. Thick contaminants that are suitable for another covering system. And so the idea here is to potentially try to create a clean lot on lot 133 of the Blue Sort building by relocating. We've talked to DEP and Concept about this, about taking the contaminated soil, since it's all one site, and moving it onto lot 133. Because when you go out there and see this, between Sullivan Street and this unnamed brook that you see, there's 4 or 5, 6 feet of grade there. So we can actually bring material there and raise the grades. And it's much more cost effective for remediation to put these kinds of contaminants under a cover system. And so next slide. So what we would do is we'll do some more characterization work as part of the next step. We will evaluate underneath the building to see if there are any VOC sources, because one thing we learned from Prime, from the other lots, is that there were not only VOCs, but there were things under the building slabs that obviously needed to be addressed. And so what we've done is, you can see the blue dashes. So what we did was those are the future kind of layout of the buildings. And so we'll take the contaminated soil from lot 133, move it over underneath that parking lot, and then also any extraneous soil contamination from the building foundation areas and from the other areas, and put them underneath that parking lot. In addition, the purple box will be an area that's outlined for the future home of another cover system. So if you move contaminated soils and you can't fit it, or you have more contamination that you discover when you do foundation holes here on lot 133, or if you do a foundation hole on the primary lots and you need to have a location for some contaminated soil, you can put it under the barrier system. So that's kind of a nutshell. I know it's pretty quick, but that's kind of what we'll do when we go out there. I'd be happy to talk more about that. Steve, do you want to mention anything about the transfer of the property, to give you guys an update on kind of what's going on? You've heard that there's this entity, Funds of Jupiter, that wants to come in, and they're going to get through the public-private partnership, is going to end up with the property, but really kind of to detail like when that will happen. I think, Steve, please.
We had hoped that we would close and transfer a property either today or tomorrow. Mr. Cahaya could not be here for the length of time we needed to have him here. There was a slight disagreement about funding, exchanging back and forth, but he had very good, productive days. He was here. We've all agreed for him that we would do the closing on July 2nd. So it's a couple of weeks away, but all of the paperwork has been done. All the deeds have been finished. Just waiting for the board to sign off on those on July 2nd. And he'll take ownership of just the large lot. The Blue Sort building and the lot 133 will transfer once they're all cleaned up and ready to go. That was not the original agreement in the document and contract that he did with the town, but they've all agreed that we can do this, so he can get started. When he was here Monday and Tuesday, he was extremely busy lining up contractors who he potentially might work with, and a couple of retail outfits. So it was pretty exciting to see this kind of activity finally coming together, and I think some of the people that he spoke with are people that he can work with. He's very particular about who he's going to work with, and they're going to share, I think, in some of the business part of it. So we're excited that this part's moving forward, and I think we'll see how it happens on the 2nd.
Sorry to put you on the spot, but thank you. You're going to add more to that than I would be able to, so that's great. And so we have another video, which is kind of a time lapse thing. We just figured we'll try to play that while we take your questions. Let's see if we can get this if this one works.
Yeah.
This one's longer, so it may or may not start. This is actually cool, and Envirovantage, the contractor that did the work, has been really eager to share kind of all the stuff with us, which is nice. Of course, their logo's on it, so I don't think they mind. So we'll take questions. We'll certainly take questions while we walk the site. So our plan is to walk the site. We're going to go through. There's a gate up here. We'll open the gate, and then we'll go into the temporary cover system and look at the site from a couple vantage points. We can also. I have some flashlights. We can also go into the kind of the entryway of a couple of the buildings, so you can kind of explore, because I know that some of you haven't actually seen inside the buildings, and hopefully you can imagine what they'll become. But you need to be careful if you're going to walk around in there anywhere, that there's a lot of trip hazards. You just have to be there's a lot of floor drains and stuff that have been that were taken out of service by Tui Associates, but there's still a trip hazard.
So Rick or Steve, actually, so is
Yeah.
130 and 133, are they being transferred now or when they're done?
When they're done,
Okay.
they have to be completed before we can transfer them.
EPA will want us to expend all the money before we transfer the property. Frank.
Can they change order the work to Envirovantage? Because Envirovantage was, I think everybody was pleased with their performance on site. We never heard anything in the public, but can the dollars, because they're 200,000, maybe there's a limit that they can't, but could they be change ordered to Envirovantage?
Not a question from me. I will tell you that while everybody, I think, to a man, was happy with the outcome of their work, I think with these two phases, because of what we're going to ask to do, we're going to remove contaminated soil. It's more of a dig project rather than a demo. There's certainly a little demo component with that 14,000 square foot building, but once you're done, I think there's some local specialists that can really handle this, that we would want to entertain bids from, and I think for using the bidding process, that our overall number for those both lots will come down.
I'm just asking because maybe you could expedite something, because the bidding process can take up to 60 days. Or something.
Yeah. So we do have a little bit of time. All the grants the grants that we're going to be using will expire next to September. So basically a year from this September, that money will not be available any longer. So in talking with Mark, he feels like the best approach for a timing will be to go out to bid in the late fall, give some flexibility to a contractor if we have a mild winter to do the work in the winter, should they wish, or do it within the first couple of months of spring and be done, wrapped up, and reported. It does put a little pressure on the environmental professionals when we do it that way, because now we've got to get all our reporting done and do have all the expenditures done. But we're sort of comfortable with that schedule at this point.
One more on lot 133. The history of that site, has that always been a parking lot use, like prime, or?
There's been some storage there, and there's been some other things. Actually, Sam could certainly speak to that. She's been doing some research on that.
Yeah, there was a garage area on the site as well as an office building. I believe the parking lot was paved in the late 70s. So after that was paved, the buildings were removed, and it's been that ever since.
I'm gonna hand out the microphones to people, but, for people who know me, I'm Tom Wright, been a resident of Berwick all my life. Is the Blue Salt building I know there's been some questions about how contaminated that has been and everything. That originally started, the Prime didn't put that building up That was a hardware and lumber store that went out of business, and Prime bought that afterwards and used it mostly for storage. So my hope is that there's not gonna be a lot of contaminants underneath the slab there. So, just put that out there for people to chew on.
I hope that too.
So I just had a question regarding, maybe this is Steve, that's all right, I can talk about it.
Yeah, but we have on tape.
Oh, yeah, we have
All right,
studio audio.
So, did you have to do any special zoning or reconfiguration for whatever future permitted uses could be as part of the property? And did the town and
That's a great
community take that all?
Yeah, that will happen, once Mark has ownership,
Oh, okay.
and, he'll look at how they can restructure the property to make it work for what his development is.
Okay.
The other piece, Kelly, is that when you heard James talk about all the hard work that the planning board has done, last summer in particular, they implemented form-based code. And form-based code with an eye on what's going to happen over here and trying to plan for that, because there was some trepidation on the part of the community that we didn't have a lot of control, and they were right, in what could happen. So we decided to dictate as it relates to form. And the planning board did an awesome job. I'm told that form-based code usually takes at least 3 times as long as it did in this community. And with the help of Southern Maine and their planner, we moved mountains, I feel like, for that project.
I'm not sure we want to do it again, but.
So now we'll go walk. Let's go walk. Go outside. It's a beautiful day.